So today we're going to be looking through a couple of the tournaments that have been going on this week, or at least last week, in the TCG Pocket. So let's just go straight into the tournament. Obviously, the main one is going to be this Pocket Weekly. It's pretty much always there. Like, it's a very consistent and a very nice amount of players. As you'll see, we've had a considerable amount. We're on 11 now. Obviously, you can show the final one. But the consistent basis of how many players, you go in the range now between 1,500 to 2,000. Obviously, it's going to be quite a big tournament with a 400 USD prize pool, so there's always an incentive to go. You can obviously register yourself in limited as well, and you can obviously go ahead and compete if you want. You can see how many players are there, so let's have a look and see what's going on in it then. So you've got all of the stuff that you can go with. You can obviously have a look at through all of the decks of all of the places. You can go all the way down. I think pretty much you can see everybody if you want to see the whole lot, but the top 200 you're kind of interested to see where basically people are using, and you can go and have a look at their decks. So for instance, if we do look at the winner straight off the bat with this, we have got a Pikachu EX and Zebra Striker deck going on. Now, obviously, this is all the people that are using that deck. There might be different ways of doing this. So if you go onto cards, you'll see the percentage of what people are using. So obviously, Blitzel, Zebra Striker, and Pikachu EX are 2, which is pretty much everybody. And then you also have the trainers as well. So if we pick into the person who actually won, let's have a look at their deck list. And you can open it up from here. So this is going to be what he specifically, or she, used to win this tournament. So we can see we've got obviously the Blitzel Zebra Striker, a pretty good hand to have, because obviously if you do have a situation where a Pokemon has been taken out of battle and he's got 30 HP left, you can obviously put Zebra Striker in, and for 1 energy you can attack the bench. We also then have Pikachu EX. I don't think he needs much introduction, as naturally he's been one of the most meta Pokemon we have had from the very, very start of the game. Him and Mewtwo are the original OGs in this, and also you throw in a bit of Zapdos, it's always going to be a standard. Now, if you obviously can see the 1s and 2s, that is just purely how many of these cards he has in his deck. So he's running a double on the Blitzel Zebra Striker, the double on the Pikachu, 1 Zapdos EX, 1 Dedenne, and 1 Electabuzz. He's also thrown in a Sabrina, Professor's Research, Giovanni with 1 of them. Then he's obviously got his X-Speeds, his Potions, and his Pokeball. That, to be honest, is a pretty standard deck across the whole of tournaments. We normally see a pretty good amount of, obviously, Pikachu EX decks and also Mewtwo decks. They're going to be the biggest ones. And as you can see, he had a tie. He had a loss to Celebi and Executor. I'm very interested to see what that is. Where did they come? To be fair, they look like they did pretty well. Lost, tie, and won everything else. 9 and 12. I don't know if it's going to tell me anywhere without actually having to find him. 28 points. How much did the other guy have? 40. So, I mean, he did have a considerable amount. Did he not? I'm trying to think how he's got only 28 points. I suppose if you have the wins, it would actually count up a little bit. So obviously with his deck, what actually beat the Pikachu, it's always nice to see. We're obviously going for the standard deck here of Snivy, Savine, and Cyperia with the Executor EX and also the Celebi. He's then throwing in a bit of Erica, which is great for the healing. You've got Professor's Research, Pokeball, and Potion. No Sabrina, no Giovanni, but that being said, you only need the 1 energy for Executor. You need then just whatever for Celebi, and you can get Cyperia as the backup in there. And you only need 2 energy once Cyperia is in play to be able to do that 70 as well. So it's a pretty standard and very, very nice deck to play with. If then we kind of go back into what we saw from the 1st and 2nd places, if we have a look in this one, no, one more. There we go. We can see that obviously looking down the list, you've got Mewtwo and Guard, Pikachu, Zebra Striker, Moltres and Charizard. You can then see a few more. You've got Aerodactyl, Primeape, lovely Greninja, and Gyarados is always a fantastic one to have. We then further down, anything else that's new? Got a bit of Farfetch and Greninja. I'm interested in that. Let's go into his deck list. What has he got then? Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes more sense. So he's going for a multi of decks. To be honest, he's looking like he's going to be using the fighting more than anything. He's going to obviously have Hitmonlee to be able to do damage to the bench. He's going to have Marshadow for the revenge. 2 Farfetches, which I can imagine is his lead. So basically what he'll do with this, as soon as, well, this is what I would personally do. Farfetch would obviously come in first if possible. Hitmonlee would be the kind of secondary there, but to be honest, you want to have bench Pokemon. But Farfetch in 1 energy can obviously do 40 straight off the back. So literally second turn in, Farfetch could be doing 40. Then obviously with the low HP, if he has a second one in as well, you could then have Marshadow ready for the revenge hit, which obviously will do 100. So if you've done 40 and 100, pretty much straight away, that's going to be a very hit and tell. Plus then having Greninja for the Water Shuriken on the back. You've got Hitmonlee, again, very much like Zebra Striker. Being able to do the bench damage is always going to be nice. So I can imagine the lead is going to be Farfetched, Marshadow as the backup, Greninja as a support, and then Hitmonlee as a bench. It's a pretty good tactic if you get the right RNG for cards coming out. He's got the Pokeball, the Draw 2, so he should be able to get the Farfetch'd in pretty simply, but he's got 2 on everything, so that Pokeball is going to be getting Farfetch, Froakie, Hitmonlee, and Marshadow, and 2 of each as well. So you're going to have a bit of luck, but still managed to run it, and I think, to be honest, with the whole deck list, as you'll see, pretty much being the standard across the board, he's done pretty well with it. We then obviously have the Charizard Arcanine, Go, Articuno, Greninja, anything else that's just outside of the box shot here. That's what I'm looking for. We've got a Zapdos and a Raichu. Keep going down. As you can see, to be honest, most of it's going to be the same. We do have a Tentacule and also a Hypno. I know they've placed 50 out of it, but 50 out of, what, 1900 or 1700 for this one isn't awful. You've obviously got the Poisonous Tentacruel there, Hypno and Drowsy coming in to be able to do the sleep. And then you've got a bit of Articuno in the normal version, which obviously can paralyze your Pokemon. And then we've got Lapras to heal as well. It's a more interesting deck, I must admit. You obviously need the... Well, I suppose you just go Water and Psychic you don't need, because obviously the option is to go with the Sleep Pendulum to be able to do that as the ability from the bench to potentially sleep your Pokemon. It can be very, very jarring to go against, especially if they keep getting it right as well. If then we've got Starmie, pretty standard across... Then we've got a bit of Mew throwing in, which is nice. Anything just totally out the random. I see a bit of Machamp. What is he going with here then? Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Machamp EX, Marshadow for the revenge, Hitmonlee for the bench, Farfetch for the easy damage, and then also having the Dizzy Punch, which obviously you've got to flip 2 coins, could potentially do the damage, which is nice. Very much like Executor, but on a basic level. And he does have 100 HP, which will get him so far as well. I kind of like it. It works pretty well, to be honest. Then if we keep going down, we've got Wigglytuff, obviously for the... I want to say Wigglytuff is sleep, isn't it? I don't think it's paralyze. Yeah, it is asleep. I don't know why I had to kind of second guess myself there. But obviously that's going to be more for the sleep, if anything. And as you go further down, you might see some more wacky shouts of decks. But as you can see, there's pretty much like 4 to 6 variations of decks. And that's what people stick with. Ooh, Lumineon we have, which is always a nice one. Pidgeot and Aerodactyl, which is pretty cool. How's he playing that? 139th. Let's have a look at what he's got. Aerodactyl, Hitmonlee, Marshadow, and then obviously going with the Pidgeot as well. Obviously going for Drive Off. Once during your opponent's turn, you're able to switch out your opponent's active Pokemon to the bench. That can be very good in the later stages of the game, because honestly, if you've got something in the back that's not fully evolved, it could definitely exploit that. So if you get it right, that could do a solid amount of damage and just attack something you don't need to. Now, I don't think I've ever seen a Tauros before in this. What does Tauros even do? Fight and Tackle. If your opponent's active Pokemon is a Pokemon EX, the attack damage does 80 more. I mean, that is pretty fantastic. Free energy for it, so you've got to make sure it's powered up. But if you're going against a Pikachu EX and you're kind of having that last move attack, that could do some pretty good damage. I think it could do quite a lot. Druddigon will be kind of in there with a lot of these decks as well. And then let's just go down to the 200. We've obviously got Onyx, a Golem with Druddigon, obviously. Then if we keep going, there's not really too many wacky shouts like we've been seeing a lot of the ability for Porygon. It may not be as meta as all of these, but it's always interesting. When you kind of look through like these sort of things, you can obviously see a few more playing to win. If we go into the Swiss rounds, you can obviously see then what the opponent's win percentages as well, versus obviously what they've kind of lost. So maybe Bolo was on a 10 win streak but didn't manage to get the final ones going, because I think in terms of combined, you've obviously got the 13, so maybe they missed some of the rounds, or I don't know how it specifically works in terms of if you do miss a match, because I know there's a time limit. So maybe if you have missed out on your chance, you're obviously there already. So he did get a 10-0, but whether he managed to finish everything or not is always the interesting part. So then if you go into the combined, then if we go into, I believe if you go into pairings, or is it metagame? Yeah, metagame is kind of where you can see decks of the percentages that they're obviously in a deck, but then also they're also win percentage. So for instance, if we look at a really high share, you can obviously see they got 50%. So it means that the share percentage is like how many people shared these two Pokemons together. There might be different variations. So if you go down a bit further, you'd be able to see Exeggutor, Cyperia. But as you see, pretty much the top three are taking up a lot of the shouts. Then we see the outside go of Exeggutor, Celebi, Cyperia, that could still feature the Exeggutor as well. It's just the two main Pokemons that are in front here. We then see less and less Charizard, Moltres, and Arcanine, but if they're used right, they could still do pretty well, like we saw in some of the stand-ins. You can see that he got third in there, seen as though it's not necessarily the highest metagame. It did pretty well. So you've got to always look at that. Obviously, if you go to the win percentage, it depends on the share as well. So obviously, they only had the 8 and 2. Of course, they're going to have a considerable amount of win percentage. It's mainly looking at how many people used it versus then the win percentage of it. So for instance, if we look at something like the Gyarados Greninja, they managed to get a 50% with 291 people using that deck. We then got Pikachu with 54 at 182, whereas obviously Mewtwo was slightly under, but they did have 11 people more utilizing their deck than any of the second, and then a little bit more of the third. So obviously you've got to take it all with a pinch of salt, but it's a good place to be able to see the decks and see where they're going. And also you can kind of have a little bit of play around with some of these decks if you've not used them. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, love Mewtwo and Guard, love Pikachu, Zapdos, Zebra the Gyarados Greninja, but it's always nice to have a little play around with different decks, especially when you are going into maybe a win streak event. If we're looking potentially to go against the new phase, so the expansion 2, or was it going to be expansion B? When we go into that, it's going to hopefully blow the water off what people are using. Maybe we're using Mewtwo with something else. Maybe we're using Guard with something else. Pikachu could have something that absolutely takes it out of there. We're going to be getting, hopefully, a lot more new Pokemon. And maybe we even get the kind of like the Cyndaquils, the Typhlosions. I will absolutely love that. So that's going to be always interesting to see where we go with this next stage, because we've not got many of the big boys yet. There's going to be so much coming to this TCG as we go through the years with it. So it's always nice to become familiar with a lot of different people's. Gengar getting itself in there as well. So in terms of the winner, I think in terms of just the generic standing, I could have probably guessed what people are utilizing. And to be honest, even if you go back to kind of like the previous tournament, if we go all the way back here, you could then have a look at kind of like the weekly 10. And to be honest, you'd pretty much find the rest. You've kind of got your Greninjas, you've got your Gyaradoses. It's not going to fully change until we get this second expansion, which hopefully should be within, I want to say it was like the next 12 days. And when it comes out late 20s, I think, in January. So it will be a massive hit to see where this meta changes from now until then. But we have got another tournament if you want to get involved. Obviously, you can register yourself at if you just Google Limitless on TCG Pocket, you'll be able to get into the website, get your account, and you can register to have a go. You obviously know what the decks are going to be all about. It tells you everything you need to know here, and then it also tells you the number of rounds and basically the prize pool as well. So it's a 150 for the win, 60, 35, 20, and 5, as you obviously do get to go. So it is pretty cool. I must admit, it's nice to get involved. These are obviously not the only tournaments as well. There is a whole section on tournaments if you want to go check this out, and it's not just for the TCG Pocket. It has got everything. So if you wanted to put your hand in it, there you go. Have a try.